Padaya, Krishna Prasthaya Vitale, Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminittam, Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Sarane, Nivase Sasamnivadi Prasvati Devatarane. Sri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Om Agyanatimanandasya Jana Jana Salakaya Chaksusamilitan Jaina Tasmai Sri Gurave Namah Sri Caitanya Manavistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Sayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Sapantantikam Vanchakopa Truvascha Kripa Sindhu Vayevacha Patitanam Pavinebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namo. Hare Krishna. Happy Sunday. Hare Krishna. We've been reading the 4th chapter of Madhya Lila of Caitanya Caritamrta, and Sri Madhavendra Puri has established Gopal, and Gopal was worshipped in such a wonderful way, and then Gopal told them his body was not yet cooled, and he required some sandalwood. And he said, no one but you, Madhavendra Puri, can do this. Please go and do this for me. So what can you do if the Supreme Personality of Godhead, your worshipable Lord, asks you to do something? So this chapter and the next chapter very much about the relationship between the devotee and the Supreme Lord in the form of Archa-Vigraha and the deity. So we heard how that part always strikes me, so I tend to mention it again and again, that Madhavendra Puri's devotion was so appealing, so attractive, that Gopal, the deity, said, I've been observing you. Of course, Krishna is in everyone's heart and observing everyone. He's the Anumanta, he's the permitter, he's the observer, Upadrashta. Upa means near and drashta means seer. So he's sitting near us all the time and he's observing how we act, which can be a very frightening thing when you think about it, or could be a very inspiring thing, because sometimes when we do something a bit naughty, we hope that no one will see us. But when we do something good, we hope that it's observed by someone. And it's not polite to say, look what wonderful thing I've just done. But we don't want it to be unnoticed either. So Krishna is there noticing everything. And he's waiting for us to turn to him. This is from the Svetasvatara and other Upanishads. There are 2 birds sitting in a tree. The tree is the body, gross and subtle, and one of the birds is trying to eat the fruit of the tree, and the other bird is just watching. And that bird who's watching is just waiting for the one who's trying to enjoy the fruit of the tree to turn to him. So part of the process of Krishna consciousness is learning enough about that second bird, the observing bird, the Krishna bird, to understand his nature. And his nature is ultimately all attractive. And the more we understand him, the more we naturally become attracted to him. And the more we become attracted to him, the more we desire to turn to him. So Gopal fed Madhavendra Puri. So remember, we're watching here the relationship between the Lord and his devotee, because we have our own concept of what the Supreme Lord is, or who the Supreme Lord is, and how he acts, and we from that derive the idea of how we should act. But here it's going to be described how the Lord acts towards a great devotee. We're not on that level, but we see the capacity. We see here in the capacity of the soul to act in such a way that, practically speaking, he has Krishna talking to him regularly, and we'll see even more than that in the next chapter. And and that Supreme Lord, the devotee is doing his part in the relationship, and the Supreme Lord is doing his part in the relationship. They're both acting according to their own positions. So here, the last thing we saw or heard was how Madhavendra Puri received the request. You could call it an order, but it's actually a request. And similarly, because we have free will, Krishna cannot exactly order us, because we can always, like a 2-year-old child, when you tell a 2-year-old child to do something, what 2-letter word immediately comes from his mouth? You should remember this. What word? Huh? It's because your boy is so good. What other word may sometimes come from a 2-year-old's mouth, very famously? No, everyone, no! You're just practicing. No. So we, and also a teenager. Except the teenagers don't say no, they go, oh. I mean, you don't even know how to use Facebook properly, and you're telling me what to do, or what to speak of TikTok and what else?
Instagram.
Huh?
Instagram.
It's like 2 years old already. Snapchat. And no one wants to admit that they know. Twitch, that was the one I was looking for. Twitch. What is Twitch? I don't know. Huh? But what does it do?
Another platform.
In any case, a request is what Krishna does. Because when there is the nature of relationship, as it can't be forced, the nature of a loving relationship, there has to be free will involved. So Krishna requests us to turn to him. And when we hear again and again how attractive Krishna is, and how pleasing he is, and what a wonderful person he is, we want to do our part in the relationship. Because why don't we give ourselves to Krishna? It's because our experience of giving ourselves to someone in this world is so fraught with pain, generally, or difficult. So there's not enough trust. And the word surrender, what picture, when we hear we're supposed to surrender to God, what picture does it bring up in your mind? Soldier, and what? Yeah, and why our hands are also up? But why are his hands up?
Afraid of being
shot. Don't shoot me. I surrender. So that type of surrender isn't what Krishna is asking for. He's asking for something more beautiful, more subtle, more sublime. So watch the dealings between Madhavendra Puri and his Lord. So Madhavendra Puri, more or less after dealing with the practical realities of his situation, he started for Jagannath Puri to get the sandalwood as requested by Gopal. Immediately, but not immediately. Immediately as much as practical, because he dealt with the practical realities of his service to make sure that they were taken care of. So then, on his way to Jagannath Puri, he stopped at one village named Ramuna, which is famous for having a deity named Gopinath. So in the corridor of the temple, this is text 113, and we read in 12 that when he saw the beauty of the deity, because his consciousness was attuned already to Krishna, so when he saw the deity, he didn't see stone or so nice, or he didn't see his own mind, he saw the beauty of the deity. And he was overwhelmed by that beauty. In the corridor of the temple from which people generally viewed the deity, Madhavendra Puri chanted and danced before the deity. His hands were also up as he was chanting and dancing. And then he sat down and asked the Brahmana what kind of foods did they offer to the deity. Because this deity of Gopinath reminded him of Gopal. And he was thinking, oh, this deity is so beautiful and he's so well taken care of. If I could just learn what foods they gave to Gopinath, then I could offer similar foods to Gopal. So again, what do we learn about what his mood was, what his consciousness was like? He was thinking of Gopal, of Gopinath with great love. From the excellence of the arrangements, Madhavendra Puri understood by deduction that only the best food was offered, because the Sanskrit word is buddhi anumane, by inference, by logic. He said they're taking care of this deity so nicely, so therefore the food that they offer to him is part of the care for the deity, so it must be also very special and well prepared. So therefore he asks. Madhavendra Puri thought, I shall inquire from the priest, the pujari, what foods are offered to Gopinath, so that by making arrangements in our kitchen, the kitchen of Gopal, we can offer similar foods to Sri Gopal. When the Brahmin priest was questioned about this matter, he explained in detail what kind of foods were offered to the deity of Gopinath. The Brahmin priest said, in the evening, the deity is offered sweet rice, Sandhya Bhoga Lagi Kheer, Amrita Keli Nam. The sweet rice that's very special, and it's called Amrita Keli because its taste is as good as Amrita or nectar. It is named Amrita Keli. This sweet rice is celebrated throughout the world as Gopinath Kheer. It is not offered anywhere else in the world. So there was a special way that they prepared it or made the ingredients. But what's very interesting is what? It's not offered anywhere else in the world, but Madhavendra Puri told them, I want to offer this to Gopal. How do you make it? What's its name? How do you prepare it? And he said, it's not offered anywhere else in the world. Would you have given him the recipe? Would you? You can ask yourself, would you? Of course, you would. But just see the open-heartedness. Here is a sincere devotee. If a mercantile person came and said, I want to make this deity and open up a shop, then he wouldn't have given it to him. But you want to serve your Gopal, and you're appreciating the way that Gopinath is served. Yes, please take it, please take it, please take it. This is the open-heartedness of Vaishnava relationships. Because Vaishnava, or a Vaishnava, or a devotee, he gets great pleasure in seeing another devotee advance. In material life, when we see someone doing better than ourselves, naturally there's a little bit of pinch in the heart, or you could say naturally or unnaturally. And although we smile and say, oh yes, very good, but inside there's some secret negative feelings. Secret because we don't want anyone to know, because it would be so embarrassing that we're wishing ill for others, especially if they're close to us. So he explained in detail what kinds of food were offered to the deity Gopinath. And is named Amrita Keli. It is Gopinath Kheer. It is not offered anywhere else in the world. While Madhavendra Puri was talking with the Brahmin priest, the sweet rice was placed before the deity as an offering. Hearing this, Madhavendra Puri thought as follows: If without asking, a little of that sweet rice is given to me, I can then taste it and make a similar preparation to offer my Lord Gopal. Now, is that anywhere near a selfish mood? Well, what do you think? Is that selfish? If I can taste a little of this, then I can know how to make it for Gopal. Is that selfish? I don't think so. Because who's the center? Selfish means I'm the center. But unselfish means that ultimately Krishna is the center. So he's really thinking of Gopal, not himself. But yet, the nature of his service was his heart was so clean. His heart was so free of selfishness that this slight me tasting it, even though his motive was right, that slight thought of me tasting it, only if I could taste it, that appeared to him as a selfish desire. Now, if a room is very, very, very dirty, a little extra dirt isn't even noticeable. But if the room is spotlessly clean, everything is spotlessly clean, then just a little piece of something or another, a leaf even, immediately it's out of place. It feels out of place and something's not right. It has to be removed. Madhavendra Puri's consciousness was spotlessly clean. So he immediately became aware of this thought, even though it wasn't really a selfish thought at all, but there was a desire in it that, due to his great humility, appeared to be selfish. Because Madhavendra Puri would never, just imagine what his consciousness, just imagine what his faith was like. And Prabhupada explains this, him being a Paramhamsa, the supreme swan who captures the essence of what the material world has to offer. He never even asked anyone, he never cooked for himself, he never begged, he never bought food. His mood was so faithful to Krishna and trusting of Krishna that his consciousness was that if Krishna wants to feed me, he'll feed me. If Krishna doesn't, okay, I'll fast. And yet there he was. After year after year after year of living in this way of complete trust in Krishna, there he was. This comes out in one of the pastimes of the 11th canto. There was a very chubby saint who was lying on the ground in Ajagara Vritti, it's called, where you adopt the mode of a python. And a python just sits there. He doesn't go chasing his food, but he basically just sits there like this. And then, as just like this, Krishna entered, his friends entered into the mouth of Aghasura. All Aghasura had done was open his mouth. So the python just sits there, and some little creature will say, I wonder what's in that little cave. And he walks in, and the python goes, or he gets near, that creature gets near the python, and the python wraps his coils around him and then eats him and digests him like that. So that's called Ajagara Vritti. So sometimes these saints, to get the experience of being protected by Krishna, to strengthen their faith, they would on one side be absorbed fully in thoughts of Krishna and serving Krishna internally, and outside they would sometimes even act like crazy people, or sometimes whatever, or they would act in any way, but they wouldn't be looking for their food, but the food would somehow come to them without anxiety. And in one sense, that's our life. We think that we're getting the food by our own power, but it's ultimately Krishna supplying it. On the other side of this, I always wondered, now what does that mean? Does that mean you can just, if I'm going to sit there like this, at least have to make some effort, at least have to go like this, at least put the food into my mouth in some way or another, or don't I? And there's a saying in Chinese that I don't know, but something about the dog waiting by the wooden rock for the rabbit, not the wooden rock, the rock for the rabbit, because in the story behind it is that a dog was sitting there and he was very hungry, and as he was sitting there, a rabbit came jumping by, and he saw the dog and became frightened and jumped right into a granite rock and died, and the dog ate him. And the dog thought, this is really a good system. I'm just going to wait here by the rock, expecting that the rabbits are going to come by every few minutes and feed me in this way. But it doesn't happen, so that was considered a foolish way to act. So I always wondered about this. What does Krishna really want? So one point of it is that it's not our work alone that brings the food, that brings the wealth, that brings the successes. It's not our work alone. But does that mean we shouldn't work? Well, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, you can't even maintain yourself without work. And I heard Prabhupada once say that at least some minimum work must be there. At least some work must be there. Some at least. So in any case, there is this. The consciousness of Madhavendra Puri was so crystal clear that this thought appeared to him to be inappropriate. And just contrast, or I can do that, contrast that to my mind and my consciousness and all the thoughts that go through my mind minute after minute, hour after hour, day after day. And how many of them are pure love and devotion and surrender and giving myself to Krishna. So if every one of those appeared as terrible, which on one level it's counter to what I want in life, then life would simply be of lamentation. So therefore, what we're requested to do to clean our consciousness, Chaito Darpana Marjanam, is what? To constantly chant Krishna's names. So this simultaneously gives us a sweet taste and also disallows selfish thoughts to come into the consciousness, and also purifies the heart. because it changes the desires. Changes the desires, and it rids us of our past, the reactions of our past fruitive activities. That's what Cito Darpana Marjana means. That the mirror of the consciousness is cleansed. So when Madhavendra Puri thought, Chira Prasad Alpa Jadipai, if I was able to get just a little bit of this chir, Svada Jani, and if I tasted this, Jani, then I know Taidse Chir Gopal Lagi. Then I know what this chir is, and then I'd be able to give it to Gopal. Such a pure thought. But he became greatly ashamed when he desired to taste the sweet rice, because it was just being offered. It wasn't offered and accepted in his mind yet. And he immediately began to think of Lord Vishnu. Oh, what have I done? What have I done? Krishna, 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 Vishnu, Vishnu. What have I done? I've desired to taste something just as when it was being offered to this beautiful, beautiful deity who's being taken care of so nicely. I've polluted the offering by my inappropriate, selfish desires. How? Oh, Hare Krishna. So he immediately began to think of Lord Vishnu, and while he was thus thinking of Lord Vishnu, the offering was completed and the arati ceremony began. And when the arati ceremony finished, Madhavendra Puri offered his obeisances to the deity. Now, why didn't he leave immediately? Yes?
He thought that he'll be offered the kheer and he didn't want to take the feeding.
But why didn't he leave immediately? He waited for the arati ceremony to be completed. Do you know? Anyone have any thought?
Etiquette?
Yeah, exactly. And etiquette isn't superficial. Like if someone is, you're allowed to see something in a wonderful person's house, and then you decide you're going to just in the middle of it, just get up and leave. That would be quite insulting after being offered that honor, and just to consider it not worthwhile of my attention right now and my presence. So Madhavendra Puri just waited, but instead, if he would have waited longer, the pujari would have naturally, they offer prasadam to everyone who's attended the arati, but he said, I'm not going to, I don't deserve this after what I've done. And we tend to be the opposite, After all I've done, I haven't gotten this, instead of after what I've done, I don't deserve anything. Because Madhavendra Puri was pure, and because he was pure, he was so humble. And why does purity bring humility? What do you think?
I think conscious comes up, your conscious grows into purity, and you become more humble.
And why? Why does the consciousness growing? Wouldn't you naturally think that growing means closer to Krishna? So therefore you'd become not humble, but you'd think yourself so fortunate.
Reading from Shastra, you become humble because the amount of things written in there. If you do not do things properly, is like quite automatically it takes you to the path of humbleness.
But there's more. Because it appears contradictory in one sense. The closer we get to Krishna, rather than feeling oneself greater and closer to Krishna, one feels oneself more and more humble and less qualified. The closer you get, the less qualified you feel. You read what the great devotees, Rupa Goswami, Sanatan, they were so humble. Krishnadas Kaviraj, Prabhupada, even though Prabhupada his service was being a warrior a lot of the time. But he once even told us, a few devotees, when he was in Japan, he said, when I'm out, I'm like a lion. But when I'm home, I'm like a lamb. Meaning humble, regular, gentle. So anyone want to venture? Why does one get... Yes, Murli.
You start appreciating the greatness of Krishna more, and then you realize how insignificant you are.
Yeah, it's the natural humility, is the natural consciousness of an insignificant soul in relationship to especially when one is in touch with the Supreme, one is naturally humble, and that humility mixed with devotion attracts the mercy of the Supreme Lord. So in one sense, the less qualified you feel, the stronger the negative pole on your magnet is, without meaning that low self-esteem. This is something quite different. But then the positive, the Supreme Positive, is more, attracts you more, the stronger your humility is, when that humility is mixed with desire to serve, to be with, to be in the presence of that all-attractive Supreme Person. So it's quite a science, actually. So he left. When the Arti ceremony was finished, Madhavendra Puri offered his obeisances to the deity and then left the temple. He did not say any more to anyone. Sri Madhavendra Puri avoided begging. He was completely unattached and indifferent to material things. If without his begging someone offered him some food, he would eat. Otherwise, he would fast. And see how wonderful the culture was. Because knowing the mentality of these Paramhamsas, or these great souls, the people would naturally feed them. Naturally. It was within the culture. In Braja, it's like that even today. That devotees, when they're walking around Govardhan Hill, they come to Jatipur, or especially Jatipur or Anayur on the other side, and they just say Madhukari, and then the Brijvasis, Govardhan Vasis, they come out and we give them a big fat chapati and some sabzi, maybe some milk, some yogurt, according to what they can. This is the culture. I know one devotee who's passed away. He was a very special soul, very unique, and he was very studious. So he studied everything. He studied Sanskrit, then he studied all the Shastras, and he studied all the different arts and the different philosophies, and he knew astrology and everything. And then finally he concluded that I should just chant Hare Krishna. That was the conclusion after all his study. And then he decided to test whether Krishna was going to really take care of him or not. So he just wandered in Braja, and he was actually from South America, Costa Rica actually. Is that officially in South America, or is it Central America? Costa Rica.
Central America.
Yeah. So he spoke Hindi by then, so he wandered in Braj, and then because with just a little bag of nothing, and one time I was talking to him and he said, when you're in this kind of a mood, even if someone offers you a a box of matches, and you don't need, right at that moment, a box of matches, you don't take it. If you do need them at that moment, you have to light up, then you take it. But even something as insignificant as a little box of matches, if you don't need it, you don't take it. And he was just traveling wearing just had a little bag, I guess another set of clothes or something like that in it. That was all. And actually I remember one time we were driving back from Govardhan and I saw him walking, a few devotees, so we invited him in the car and we drove him to Krishna Balaram Mandir, and he was just we were just talking and he was just so happy and carefree. And he said, I said, do you have to walk most of the time? And he said, no, devotees, people are very kind to me and they give me rides. But he was just so free from anxiety. So then he decided at some point that it was too easy in Braja, because the culture was to take care of people in that way. So he went traveling in South India like that. And I saw him after that, so I assume he survived. Quite astounding. And then finally he decided that he was going to preach. And then very soon after that he died, even though he was much younger than me. So it was really very mysterious. Passed away. And there were devotees surrounding him. And he was in a lot of pain. But he wanted to take care of the devotees, and then finally they said, it's okay, we'll be taken care of. And then he sort of said, okay. And then that day he left. It's very, very mysterious. But he didn't have that opportunity to preach that he really wanted. So he went through so many different steps. So Prabhupada in his purport describes the Paramhamsa stage, because Madhavendra Puri was on this stage, and some of what I already told you comes from this purport. This is the Paramhamsa stage, the highest stage for a sannyasi. A sannyasi can beg from door to door just to collect food, but a Paramhamsa who has taken Ayachitta vritti or Ajagara vritti does not ask anyone for food. If someone offers him food voluntarily, he eats. Ayachitta vritti means being accustomed to refrain from begging, and Ajagara vritti indicates one who is compared to a python, the big snake that makes no effort to acquire food, but rather allows food to come automatically within its mouth. In other words, a Paramhamsa simply engages exclusively in the service of the Lord without caring even for eating or sleeping. So there is the essence. So we may think that the real thing is, boy, he must have been amazing to just not even beg for his own food. But the real amazing thing is not that, but the internal part, that he was fully, continuously, and only engaged in Krishna's service, internally chanting, internally on a completely different level than mundane consciousness. And of course the external part of not begging can't be imitated, but rather it comes naturally if the internal part of complete satisfaction due to the awakened relationship with Krishna is achieved, then the external part comes automatically. So therefore no imitation is allowed, suggested even, because it's really the internal that has to be developed, and then the detachment from matter will automatically come. And if one tries to imitate the external without being the internal, then one finds oneself in a very difficult situation. That one is, there's so many ways to describe that situation. But I think you all know what I mean, because your body is doing one thing and your mind is doing exactly the opposite, is desiring something the opposite. And then it's just a matter of time before the body aligns itself with the mind. So therefore, param dristvinavartate, the higher taste is the goal, and it's the goal and the means to proper external activities. And of course, they work together. So, in other words, a Paramahamsa simply engages exclusively in the service of the Lord without caring for even eating or sleeping. It was stated about the 6 Goswamis, Nidrahara Vihara Kadi Vijato. In the Paramahamsa stage, one conquers the desire for sleeping, food, and sense gratification. One remains a humble, meek mendicant, engaged in the service of the Lord day and night. Madhavendra Puri had attained this Paramahamsa stage. Then we'll just read this next verse and we'll end for the day, because this is just an explanation of Madhavendra Puri's stage. And remember that we'll hear what's going to happen next is that this internal stage that's also reflected in the external stage, but it's the reflection of the internal stage, because you can theoretically have the external stage without the internal stage. But we're meant to get a clear understanding about the internal mood of Madhavendra Puri, that naturally, it was completely natural that he acted in this aloof, detached way from all material happiness because of his internal. That's what attracted Gopal. And then also Gopinath. And remember that also point that his consciousness was so pure and fixed in a serving mood that this slight thought that wasn't really self-centered or selfish, it was Gopal-centered, but still he didn't like it. And he felt ashamed of it. And he thought, I'm just going to go and chant. I'm not going to follow this thought any further and desire. I won't take this sweet rice because my consciousness is contaminated. So amazing. So a Paramahamsa like Madhavendra Puri, this is text 124, is always satisfied in the loving service of the Lord. Material hunger and thirst cannot stop his activities. When he desired to taste a little sweet rice offered to the deity, he considered that he had committed an offense by desiring to eat what was being offered to the deity. So in Prabhupada's purport he says, it is advisable that food being offered to the deity be covered when taken from the kitchen to the deity room, and that way others may not see it. And say if you have food and you're carrying it to the deity or something, and somehow an animal looks at it. If a dog sees what you're going to offer to the deity, it can no longer be offered. Because the dog is, what's he going to think? There's no question of him thinking, oh, what a nice offering for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, how wonderful. Only if I could cook like that, only if I could chant some names of Krishna other than Ram, Ram. So it's unofferable if a dog sees it.
Or
a child, yeah. Or an adult, for that matter. Therefore it's covered. And no adults are allowed to peek. However, when it is brought before the deity, it must be uncovered. Seeing the food uncovered before the deity, Madhavendra Puri desired to taste a little of it so he could prepare a similar sweet for his Gopal. Madhavendra Puri was so strict, however, that he considered this to be an offense. Consequently, he left the temple without saying anything to anyone. The Paramhamsa is therefore called Vijita Sadguna. He must conquer the 6 material qualities: Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moha, Matsarja, and Kshuddha Krishna, lust, anger, greed, illusion, enviousness, hunger, and thirst. So we'll stop here because the next part explains Madhavendra Puri went to the marketplace to sit down and just chant, and the priest put the deity to sleep, and the third person involved in this pastime is Gopinath himself. So the interaction between the 3 of them is very, very special. Okay, we shall stop here. Any questions or comments? Or just, what do you think of this? You feel like becoming a Paramhamsa? Not externally, without the internal. Yeah.
You mentioned about humility and the difference between humility and low self-esteem.
Yeah.
Could you explain a little bit more about that?
Yes. Humility means, low self-esteem is, I'm so bad, I do everything wrong, this person is better than me, and this person is better than me, and I'm so bad I can't do anything. That's low self-esteem. I can't succeed at anything, I can't do anything. So who are you thinking about all the time? Yourself. And humility, you may touch what you can, a fault with your consciousness, but then you take shelter of Krishna. Oh Krishna, without your mercy, what can I do? I'm your servant. Please guide me, correct me. I'm your servant, I'm yours, I'm yours. So you're thinking of Krishna. So humility has the extra aspect of always thinking about Krishna in it. And low self-esteem has the central aspect, I'm always thinking of myself. So how is always thinking this? That's just neurotic behavior, basically. It's not humility. What do you think? So the people who if you're counseling and they have low self-esteem problem, so they'll need shelter. But instead of taking shelter of Krishna, which would make them humble, they take shelter of what? Well, what are some of the things people take shelter of when they have low self-esteem?
Drugs.
Often. Intoxication. All the things that we're asked to avoid. They take shelter of...
Plastic surgery. Plastic surgery.
Plastic surgery. I was once giving class in New Zealand, and I was in a peculiar mood when I was giving the class, and I said, what do you do when you need shelter? What do you do? And one person raised the hand and said, yes, chocolate. It was funny. Shopping therapy, there's unlimited things, internet, this, that, just wasting time, just somehow covering the consciousness, distraction. The distraction from, in one form or another, all this is just distraction from the real issue. And the real issue is, I'm tiny, I'm imperfect, have so many faults, and I'm meant to take shelter of the Supreme Personality. And what we do is distract ourselves from the issue because it's too painful to continuously confront the issue. So one form of distraction or another is what we do.
Pets.
Pets. Pets, yes.
A comedy movie.
Comedy movies. How about tragedy movies? Any movie. Because it's so boring to think about yourself all the time. You have to do something. Or cricket. You can take shelter of cricket. But a Paramahamsa like Madhavendra Puri, he just always was in the shelter of Krishna. And you can only do that when there's love. Good question. Any other thoughts or questions? We have exactly, yes.
I realize that as Paramahamsas, they're actively still making that effort to not, for example, not have to beg. They're making that conscious effort in this system. I thought it was an automatic thing that when you're at that platform, you don't even think about it. It's just, you're so conscious about Krishna that thinking about food does not.
And Prabhupada said, he said something other than that. So, yes.
Can you state the question so that the person who's watching it can know?
Yes. Question is for a Paramahamsa, is it automatic that because they're so absorbed in Krishna, they don't think about eating and sleeping, and so therefore they don't beg? Or they have to say, the rule of my order is not to beg, so I don't beg? That's basically the question. And from what Prabhupada said, it seems like there's stages. And that's what it seems, that there's stages. If everyone becomes a Paramahamsa, you won't have a job as a cook. What will you do? You'll have to become a Paramahamsa also. One devotee told me that who was serving Prabhupada, told him that I start translating my books at 2 a.m. or something. You're welcome to come and sit with me while I translate. So the devotee, what a puzzle, because you want to do it, but you have your physical needs. So he said to Prabhupada, I'm already only sleeping 5 hours a night. I can't do it. And Prabhupada said, well, I do it. And then the devotee said, but you're a Paramahamsa. And Prabhupada said, why aren't you a Paramahamsa? You couldn't beat him. Well, and that's a good question to ask ourselves. Why aren't I a Paramahamsa? well, I'm not going to ask, all the reasons that we're not Paramahamsas, but we know why we're not Paramahamsas, and it's lack of you could say lack of purity, lack of desire on the positive side, and maybe lack of humility. Yeah, such a heavy, just imagine Prabhupada saying that to you. Just imagine. Eat shaku while you are not Paramahamsa. Well, Prabhupada, I was just sort of planning on it, at some time. That's what it was like to some degree in Prabhupada's presence, that you had to be fire to be that close to such a big fire. But you had to be surrendered and humble. And you had to just love him also. Did you want to say something, or were you just getting rid of a fly?
Fly.
Why you are not Paramahamsa? Why you are not getting rid of fly? So the problem with asking, teasing people like that is because I have to hear that question myself, and I'm thinking, it reverberates backwards on you. Did you want to ask or say?
One devotee Atmavan Das is asking online that how do we don't put ourselves into a stage of imitating the humility of Madhurya while we practice devotion at his level.
How can we avoid imitation, basically? We have to know yourself and your capacity, and you have to be under the order, the guidance of others. Others who we trust, are interested in our welfare and are on a higher platform than ourselves. There's a saying that even an expert doctor doesn't prescribe for himself. You know, when you're an expert doctor, you go to a doctor when you're sick, just like everyone else does. And also, like, I noticed that with counselors, almost always, because you wonder who counsels them when they always have counselors. And in fact, it's built into systems that for every week of your counseling, you have to have. I've known many systems that are built like that. They have to have an hour of counseling for every week for themselves, so they can let it all out. So, someone more experienced than themselves. So we need trusted guidance, or guidance from trusted individuals. And if we don't have any individuals we trust, then we should pray to Krishna to put us in touch with some individuals who we trust. Is that who is it? Atma?
Atma and
Any other questions? Krishna Lila, was that a question or a fly removal machine? Which?
A fly.
It was a fly. Okay. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Caitanya Caritamrta ki jai. Srila Prabhupada Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol.